on Cantha, Elona, and the free city of Lion's Arch. What we can know about the lands overseas, we know from the hands of refugees, lost warriors, and desperate sojourners. It is slanted, and as all such history must be, against the blade of a sword. The history of Cantha and Elona as we know it ceases around the time of Or's liberation from the sea. Little contact with these nations has made its way north to the Tyrian continent. The undead of Or and the upheaval in the Crystal Desert made news scarce and difficult to acquire. Cantha. In the year 1127 after the Exodus, Emperor Yusoku, successor to Kisu, took a firm hold of his nation. He raised the Canthan military, spending millions in gold to arm his troops, and then swept the countryside. He defeated the Luxans and the Kurziks, incorporating these disparate people back into his nation. Yusoku united Cantha behind a strong national identity and began to drive out all non-humans. His regime was ironclad, tyrannical and fierce. Those Canthans who did not agree with the emperor's dictates were given no choice but to leave their homeland, seeking refuge and sanctuary in Elona and Tyria. As a result, Cantha became extremely isolationist. Once Or rose from the ocean, those tendencies were reinforced by an inability to safely sail the western seas. Any ships venturing near the Strait of Malcor are sunk by the Black ships, then dredged from the ocean floor by the Orion dragon and commandeered into service. Thus, completely cut off from Krita, Cantha vanished entirely. Travellers, refugees, and even Jinlai agents residing within Tyria heard nothing more from Cantha. Sporadic sailors have washed ashore on the southern coast of the Maguma jungles, but that is the only evidence that Cantha even exists past the cataclysmic event that cut it off from Tyria. It can only be assumed that Yusoku's successors continued his dictatorial, isolationist rule, and that Cantha continues beneath the iron fist of the Emperor as ever. On Elona. For years after the defeat of Varish Ossa and the fall of Abaddon, Elona was at peace. The Sun Spears spread across all three continents, attempting to fulfill their ancient purposes. But the peace they brought was not to last. In their campaign to end the threat of Varish Ossa and stop Abaddon's final attempt to free himself from the prison of the gods, the Sun Spears also unleashed the architect of their own doom back upon the world, a monster who would bring about the next Dark Age. The monster's name was Palawa Joko. Within 60 years of Cormyr's rise to godhood, Palawa Joko mustered his former power and marched a new army of mummies, zombies, and other undead out of the Crystal Desert into war with Vabi. To ensure his dominance, Palawa dammed and diverted the River Elon, causing drought and famine amid the northern provinces of Elona and creating a green and glowing area within the Crystal Desert. In this area, Palawa Joko established the seat of his new kingdom. The horrible famine caused by the diverted river caused widespread rebellion among the people of Vabi and Northern Corner. Palawa Joko then found it all too easy to break the backs of Elonian resistance. Vabi bowed to his strength simply to survive, and Corner and Istan both became vassal states. Palawa's price for benevolence was tribute, forced loyalty, and all those who bore the name Ossa delivered unto his care. Periodically, a few more descendants were found hiding in the hills of Elona, and all were delivered unto the undead ruler of Elona. From the descendants of his ancient enemy, Palawa created a living army to match his undead one, reveling in the irony that Ossa's children owed their lives and their loyalty to him. Palawa also took great pride in the destruction of his greatest enemies, the Sun Spears. Broken, their strongholds destroyed, their members scattered to the winds, they stood as a force no longer in Elona. Eventually, most of the populace forgot about the Order and their heroic deeds. Those few Sun Spears who survived passed on the teachings of the Order over the course of more than 100 years, holding on to the tenets of a barely remembered vision. They became wandering mystics, philosophers, and lone warriors in a world that chose to forget their presence. All but a few. Some Sun Spears, taken in by Palawa Joko's offers of power and rank, abandoned their vows. These traitors to the Order were given command of Palawa's armies or allowed to work alone against those in Elona who once scorned them. Each one, converted personally by Palawa, was given the power over death and sent out to hunt down and destroy their fellow Sunspears, or bring them before their lord to be drawn into their unholy cause. These knights, called the Mordaunt Crescent, became a dark presence in the sunlit southern lands of Tyria. On the Order of Whispers. The Order still exists, and has moved beyond the borders of Elona. The first to discover the awakening of the dragons, in Or and elsewhere, the Order was aware that nobody would believe them. They chose instead to spread their members across Tyria, gaining as many converts as possible and then slowly educating them about the real danger threatening the races of the world. They work with the Critons and Ascalonians and even maintain a presence in Elona, although crossing the Crystal Desert is currently impossible due to Palawa's stranglehold over the southern reaches and the desert dragon's presence in the northern desert. Still, the Order of Whispers somehow maintains communication with Elona, aiding its military in their fight against Palawa and his minions. The Order of Whispers also contributed to the continuation of human knowledge when Lion's Arch was flooded, threatening the great library within the city. The Order rescued thousands of ancient scrolls, books, and other historical artifacts, carrying them to a hidden monastery in the nearby Shiver Peaks. Stored far above the rising waters, these antiquities remain the only true records of the ancient age of humanity. The monks of that monastery are part historian and part warrior, studying and protecting their sacred charges. On Lion's Arch. When the waters that inundated Lion's Arch after ore rose from the sea began to recede, the ruins of that once majestic city became a pirate stronghold. Those sea-going vessels driven off the Orient Island chain by the rise of undead found safe haven in the ruins of Lion's Arch and created there a neutral town open to all races, ruled in a mercenary fashion. The Battle Isles flooded at the same time, decimating the temples. The priests of Balthazar scattered for a time before also finding their way to Lion's Arch after the tides began to recede. They claim they were called there by Balthazar, and the god did indeed open a massive portal within the city to the mists where a great battle between worlds wages for his favour. With the fall of the Battle Isles, Lion's Arch became the guild home, a central point for guilds of the world as well as the conduit to the Heroes' Hall. On dwarves. Those few who remain live undying existences, their flesh and hearts encased in stone. The Great Dwarf gave them the power to defeat the destroyers, but that strength came with a heavy price. The fight between dwarves and the destroyers consumed the dwarven race. Few lived to return to the surface and tell their tale of their victory, and those who did have been irrevocably altered. No longer made of flesh and bone, no blood pumped through their veins. Instead, they found their bodies composed entirely of stone surrounding nothing but cold, hard earth. No longer interested in maintaining their solidarity as a race, these last dwarves scattered across Tyria, finding battles to fight in the deep caverns or making new homes in far-flung halls, ever watching the borders where the caverns emerge into the surface world. Those few individuals who can rightfully claim to have met a dwarf in their lifetime are rare, and all speak of the strange, driven passion that consumes these few survivors. On the Char. The legions of the Char threw off the shackles of religion, casting their shamans down to the lowest order of Char society and elevating the military warbands into a solidified government. Although the legions have no central rule, they work together to maintain their territories in Ascalon and make plans to one day spread farther, eradicating humans wherever they fester on the face of the world. The four primary legions of the Char, the Ash Legion, Blood Legion, Gold Legion, and Iron Legion, each control city strongholds, spread out across the eastern lands. Char warbands strike out from these safe havens to defend their territories, battling the shades of Ascalonian warriors, the twisted servants of the Desert Dragon, and the horrifying beasts that come up from beneath the ground throughout Ascalon and the Shiver Peaks. While all four legions can claim lineage to the Khan-Er, the ancient ruler of the Char, the Gold Legion has been considered outcast since the fall of the Shaman caste during the time of the famous Char heroine, Kala Scorchrazor. And yet, the Char alliance remains strong enough that none of the three allied legions bars another from their capital. Even though the lands of the Char are divided, the legions work together to unify the whole and finish their conquest to the heart of Ascalon City and beyond. The fall of the Char shamans from their height as leaders affected more than the Gold Legion. While shamanism is still considered useful to the war effort, these Char are also viewed as dangerous and subversive, and are almost universally scorned. No Char in the New Age would willingly suffer a shaman to rule them. Even after more than 200 years, the Char still bristle at the memories of the time when the shamans and the titans held power over them. The Char of today are fierce in their rejection of all gods and any who serve them. They do not accept any god's authority and are quick-tempered about any Char worship or manipulation by godlike beings. And while no Char would ever willingly follow the shamans, it is the underlying goal of every Char leader to prove his own superiority, subjugate his fellows, and raise the banner of one legion above the rest. Unity, they say, can only be established beneath a single military leader. Most Char believe that only under such rule can their race fulfill its destiny to rule all of Tyria. Unfortunately for them, and fortunately for the members of the other races, most Char leaders also believe the only capable leader of unifying their race is themselves. On the ASURA. The ASURA are a subterranean race driven to the surface during the time of the Great Destroyer. Incredibly intelligent, they use their skills with magic and crafting to establish their presence on the surface. With the sudden absence of the dwarves, the ASURA became the foremost crafters on Tyria, their abilities and skills instantly invaluable. The ASURA acclimated to life above ground in the wake of the destroyers, creating cities that span territory above and below the surface. Although the ASURA have grown to appreciate the skills and talents of other races, often using them in experiments or on dangerous missions, they still hold fast to their organised society. They have no organised government, preferring to create crews and follow the most experienced leader for the duration of each individual task. The short stature of this race has not impeded their confidence, however. In fact, one might even call them condescending, as they are perhaps a touch too confident for the comfort of some other races. The ASURA believe they are destined to rule the larger, less intelligent races of the world. They see humans especially as quite good for heavy lifting and, in general terms, view other races as merely pawns to be manipulated in ASURAN schemes. As a step in their master plans, the ASURA established good relations with every other intelligent race on Tyria, from the militant Char to the inquisitive Sylvari. They even established ASURA gates in major cities to provide safe passage from city to city and promote trade. However, they control these gates jealously, maintaining their trade routes and their neutrality as carefully as a gem, always keeping themselves on the edges of disputes and wars. Their own cities are far off the main paths of travel, distant even from Central Lion's Arch. There they perform experiments, searching for new magics and a new power to control. Although some say the ASURA have integrated into society, it would be more accurate to say they're creeping over it like ivy and moss, fingers digging into crevices where their magic can take hold. In some ways, they fear the caverns beneath the earth, still troubled by horrible beasts of fire and scale. The dragon that dwells in the depths threatens them above all, forcing them to abandon their ancient ways and discover new resources. For now, to keep their place, they must maintain their neutrality among the powerful races of Tyria. But the ASURA fear that sooner or later they will have to take sides, and then their tottering world may crumble back into the dark depths. On the Norn. Many expected the initial Char expansion through northern Tyria to become a tide of blood that would crash upon the Shiver Peaks, drowning Char and Norn alike. The reality proved different. When the Char reached the foothills, the Norn drove them back with a single crushing blow, completely decimating every warband that set against them. Although it is certain the Char could have destroyed the Norn resistance if they but turned their entire army, or even one full legion, to the cause, warbands and other smaller raiding parties could not overcome the individual strength of the Norn. These initial skirmishes taught both sides to respect the strength of the other. From this accord of mutual respect and strength arose a strange pseudo-alliance that is yet to be broken. For nearly 200 years, the eastern border of the Shiver Peaks has been stable. The Char allowed passage through Gunnar's Hold and the lower canyons where the Norn had spread. In fact, during the Searing, the Norn allowed the Char armies passage through the northern pass from Ascalon into Kryta, setting the stage for the Char invasion of the central human lands. Although this was not a sign of any alliance, it set the stage for the two races to live within a watchful peace. No peace accord was ever signed. A treaty would have been meaningless to the individualistic Norn, and no Char would ever spit upon such a paper. However, the two races allowed one another passage and trade while keeping their borders secure. Occasionally, a warband or a Norn hunter might cross the line into the other's land only to be cut down without prejudice, but these skirmishes do not disrupt the accord reached by mutual consent between these nations. Over the past 100 years, more and more Norn have been seen in Kryta and the lands beyond. An elder dragon of ice and snow arose in the farthest northern peaks, driving even the most stalwart hunters south into dwarven lands. There, they found abandoned dwarven forts and a new challenge in the form of the Dredge, the old nemesis of the dwarves, now almost unrecognizable from the primitive, frightened creatures of the past. The Dredge, reveling in their newfound freedom after the dwarves fell to the destroyers, seized that opportunity to become a real threat in the Shiver Peaks, while the Norn revel in the hunt of new enemies. The Norn and Dredge fight over control of these lands in a continual war that rages along the highest mountains. The Norn also have kept ties with their human friends, although those ties are not as close as they once were, for the Norn often felt betrayed by their unpredictable human allies. In recent years, that sense of betrayal has deepened as the Norn do not trust the Krytan Queen. The Queen is seen by members of this independent race as being too dependent on her advisors, too unwilling to act on her own as a hero must. Although relations have grown colder, the Norn still hold out hope that the Krytan Queen will prove herself by dominating her race, or that someone else will rise from among the humans to show them what it means to be strong. On the Sylvari. While humans explored the far Shiver Peaks and the dwarves fought the destroyers, a new race began to grow in the southern lands of Tyria. A single seed, as big as a man's fist, planted in the ground of a ruined village along the southern tip of the Maguma jungle, began a centuries-long gestation and heralded a new age. The story began with a human soldier named Ronan, whom, while separated from his patrol, discovered a cavern filled with strange seed pods. This cavern was protected by terrible plant creatures, so he fled, clinging to a single seed to show to his daughter when he returned home from war. But upon his arrival, Ronan discovered the Masat had destroyed his village and murdered his family, leaving only ruined houses and mass graves. In agony, he planted the seed on their graves and swore never to return to battle. Ronan was joined by an aging centaur named Ventari, who had also begun to lose hope in peace. The human and the centaur, against all odds, formed a friendship that surpassed the bounds of race. Together, they decided to begin their lives anew and create a refuge for human and centaur alike. They built their safe haven near the ocean and the budding tree for all those who sought peace and the shelter of friendship. The pale oak grew under the watchful and gentle eye of Ventari, becoming strong and healthy and giving the old centaur great joy. Yet with this bliss came sorrow. The centaur tribes of the north and west, crushed and driven out by Krytans fleeing from their flooding coastline, grew more and more savage and brutal. As more tribes joined the war, fewer were willing to listen to Ventari's words, and his new outpost became smaller and smaller. At last, old and grey, Ventari carved his life's lessons upon a marble tablet, which he placed at the base of the pale tree so that future travellers might read it and, perhaps, learn the ways of peace and harmony. Then, many years after his human companion had passed on, Ventari laid down beside the tree Ronan had planted and died. The year was 1165 AE. The tree, white and sparkling, continued to grow. Over 100 years later, small cocoons appeared among its branches. These cocoons spun out, shifting and eventually ripping open, birthing a new race of people into the world, fully grown, as if they had awakened from some magical dream. They called themselves the Sylvari, and these firstborn were only the beginning of a widespread emergence, all born from the same massive tree. The marble tablet still bears Ventari's last words, and the Sylvari who emerged from the trees found themselves strangely guided by these ancient lessons. Whether the tree, tended by Ventari, somehow became imprinted with the noble centaur's morals and ethics, or whether it absorbed both the remains of the centaur's flesh as well as his compassionate soul upon his death, no one knows for certain. But it is certain that his influence over the Sylvari is strong, even so many decades after his death. Their race venerates the Ventari tablet as their most sacred artifact and testament. It is unknown how old a Sylvari can become, as they come forth fully mature and show no signs of aging thereafter. Sylvari have no children, no families as such, but each Sylvari feels a special connection with others through what they call the Dream of Dreams. In this dream, they commune with the inner mind of the race, learning how to speak, walk, use simple tools and interact with the world. Thus, when a Sylvari emerges, she knows a great deal more about the world than one might expect. But the Dream of Dreams also contains nightmares, hidden whispers behind the voices of their fellow Sylvari. They do not understand what it means, but the Sylvari have yet to experience much of the world around them. They do not know the dangers and troubles of Tyria as intimately as the other races do. But they are learning. Time and tide. The years have not been kind to Tyria. Even so, as green plants grow over the scorched rocks of Ascalon and the waters recede from Lion's Arch, a new city rises and the shattered coastline gives way to new life. New adventures lurk around every corner, and ancient places beneath the surface push up, their doors open to reveal lost secrets. However, the massive power of the dragons has been unleashed, spilling across the land like a disease that twists everything in its wake. Unless they can be stopped, the dragons will change the face of Tyria irrevocably, eradicating the sentient races. To what end? We can only guess. Time and tide have changed the world. The races of Tyria now stand on equal ground, fighting for superiority, even as the dragons, far older than history, truly primal powers, awaken to claim the world in their bloody claws. If there are heroes left in these lands anywhere among the races, it is time for them to step forward, if the world is to be saved. Someone must rise to seize glory, offer a moment of hope, and perhaps give the world one last chance for peace. If those who would be heroes are listening, now is your time. And so there you go, guys. That is the movement of the world. It is a fascinating read to me. It presents Tyria as a much more magical and scary place, honestly. And that perspective of excitement and adventure and so forth has been really interesting to see how it actually translated into the in-game experience eventually. I may do another speculation discussion video about some of these more interesting nuances that this article presents that have almost entirely been dropped or forgotten about ever since it came out way back in 2007. Stuff like the perspective of Ventari's life, how everyone was actually just leaving him and he lost all of his followers, and it's actually quite a sad story. Stuff about the Norn not trusting the humans, stuff about these early Char skirmishes against the Norn. That stuff's really not referenced in-game. It's kind of all swept aside to get all of the races unified very, very quickly, and I think that's a big shame, but maybe we'll talk about that at some point. I hope you enjoyed these couple of videos, guys. Thanks very much for listening. It was my plan a long time ago, back when I wanted to originally have finished the lore series, to do these videos introducing Guild Wars 2, and I think on the anniversary, it was a pretty good opportunity. Thanks, guys. Let me know if you enjoyed the video. It was quite a lot of work on this one, so I really would appreciate hearing if it's the kind of stuff you like to see. And until next time, everyone, have a very good evening.